Hello everyone and welcome back to another lesson. Today I will be covering slides 20 to 24 in your evolution notes. I will be talking about the 5 fingers of evolution, specifically focusing on natural selection in particular. Now, the 5 fingers of evolution, these are the driving forces that influence evolution. So I'm going to first start with a video. This video can also be found under helpful videos in your OneNote. It's this video right here, the second to last one, the 5 fingers of evolution.
The 5 Fingers of Evolution. A thorough understanding of biology requires a thorough understanding of the process of evolution. Most people are familiar with the process of natural selection. However, this is just one of 5 processes that can result in evolution. Before we discuss all 5 of these processes, we should define evolution. Evolution is simply change in the gene pool over time. But what is a gene pool? And, for that matter, what is a gene? Before spending any more time on genetics, let us begin with a story. Imagine that a boat capsizes and 10 survivors swim to shore on a deserted island. They are never rescued and they form a new population that exists for thousands of years. Strangely enough, 5 of the survivors have red hair. Red hair is created when a person inherits 2 copies of the red gene from their parents. If you only have 1 copy of the gene, you won't have red hair. To make this easier, we will assume that the 5 non-redheads are not carriers of the gene. The initial frequency of the red hair gene is therefore 50%, or 10 of 20 total genes. These genes are the gene pool. The 20 different genes are like cards in a deck that keep getting reshuffled with each new generation. Sex is simply a reshuffling of the genetic deck. The cards are reshuffled and passed to the next generation. The deck remains the same, 50% red. The genes are reshuffled and passed to the next generation. The gene pool remains the same, 50% red. Even though the population may grow in size over time, the frequency should stay at about 50%. If this frequency ever varies, then evolution has occurred. Evolution is simply change in the gene pool over time. Think about it in terms of the cards. If the frequency of the cards in the deck ever changes, evolution has occurred. There are 5 processes that can cause the frequency to change. To remember these processes.
So again, he was using that example to start to illustrate what happens if you have a population that is isolated, so in this case on an island, and we had a 50-50 split between those different types of genes. It's never going to change over time unless we have the things that we're going to talk about happen.
We will use the fingers on your hand, starting from the little finger and moving to the thumb. The little finger should remind you that the population can shrink. If the population shrinks, then chance can take over. For example, if only 4 individuals survive an epidemic, then their genes will represent the new gene pool. The next finger is the ring finger. This finger should remind you of mating because a ring represents a couple. If individuals choose a mate based on their appearance or location, the frequency may change. If red-headed individuals only mate with red-headed individuals, they could eventually form a new population. If no one ever mates with red-headed individuals, these genes could decrease. The next finger is the middle finger. The M in the middle finger should remind you of the M in the word mutation. If a new gene is added through mutation, it can affect the frequency. Imagine a gene mutation creates a new color of hair. This would obviously change the frequency in the gene pool. The pointer finger should remind you of movement. If new individuals flow into an area or immigrate, the frequency will change. If individuals flow out of an area or emigrate, then the frequency will change. In science, we refer to this movement as gene flow. All 4 of the processes represented by our fingers can cause evolution. Small population size, non-random mating, mutations, and gene flow. However, none of them lead to adaptation. Natural selection is the only process that creates organisms better adapted to their local environment. I use the thumb to remember this process. Nature votes thumbs up for adaptations that will do well in their environment and thumbs down to adaptations that will do poorly. The genes for individuals that are not adapted for their environment will gradually be replaced by those that are better adapted. Red hair is an example of one of these adaptations. Red hair is an advantage in the northern climates because the fair skin allowed ancestors to absorb more light and synthesize more vitamin D. Thumbs up. However, this was a disadvantage in the more southern climates where increased UV radiation led to cancer and decreased fertility. Thumbs down. Even the thumb itself is an adaptation formed through the process of natural selection. The evolution that we have described is referred to as microevolution because it refers to a small change. However, this form of evolution may eventually lead to macroevolution or speciation. Every organism on the planet shares ancestry with a single common ancestor. All living organisms on the planet are connected back in time through the process of evolution. Take a look at your own hand. It's an engineering masterpiece that was created by the 5 processes I just described over millions and millions of years. Can you recall the 5 main causes of evolution from memory? If you can't, hit rewind and watch that part again. But if you can, give yourself or your neighbor a big 5-fingered high five.
All right, so now in our notes, we're going to summarize those 5 fingers of evolution. So I'm going to start with the first 2 that were discussed. In the video, he referred to genetic drift. He said small population. I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about that in terms of this thing called genetic drift. So as stated in the video, these 5 forces cause a change in the frequency or gene pool. So again, thinking about genetics here, DNA, we're having some type of change happen, and that's causing us to see that change in the physical traits and the phenotype. So genetic drift will have a large impact on small populations. So he was talking about how if there are individuals that survive an epidemic of some sort and only certain genes are left from the gene pool, then they will repopulate and you'll get a change in the allele frequency. I'm going to use ladybugs here as an example. So let's say we have a population of ladybugs. They are red and blue. And let's say again, these are things that happen by random chance. So that's what genetic drift specifically is talking about. So let's say randomly they get swatted and only the blue ones are the ones that are killed. So if we continue to have reproduction take place, now the population is going to have more red ladybugs than blue. And that was due by a random chance of this happening. Now let's look at the non-random mating. So it's not random. Within a population, mates are chosen typically. So this means that it's not the individuals within a population don't just mate with whoever. They usually pick their mate or their partner. Birds are a really good example of this. Oftentimes the male bird will be extremely colorful. Some of them even will perform specific dances in order to impress a female. Again, because they want to be chosen by that female. So the female will choose a male bird or their mate based on certain physical traits. And if they mate with that bird, then those traits will get passed on to the offspring. And over time, we can see a change in that population. The next one that we looked at was mutations. Mutations can be good, bad, or neutral, but they do create more genetic variation. So a lot of times, as you guys did with your projects, all of the mutations that you were looking at were genetic diseases that are pretty bad for people. But thinking about not just humans for a moment here, but let's say these beetles, for instance, okay? So again, mutations, they can be good, bad, or neutral. So let's say we have these green beetles. And let's say all of a sudden there is a mutation and now all of a sudden you have a brown beetle. Well, it depends on the type of environment that they're in. So if the environment is green, let's say, well, these beetles, the green ones would blend in, but this brown one might stand out and most likely be eaten. But let's say the environment is brown. Well, then this one will be more likely to blend in and more likely to survive better than the green beetles. So again, the mutation, it can be good, bad, or neutral. It may depend on the type of environment. And when we talk about natural selection, we'll explore that idea a little bit more. Now, the next one is gene flow. So this is simply just organisms of the same species, because the same species can breed with each other to create fertile offspring. So the only difference is they just vary in their phenotype. They have different traits. So in this case, maybe we have some birds that are blue in color, and then we have some that are red in color. Now, populations are the same individuals living in a certain area. So you can have certain individuals leave or join a different group of the same species, and this is going to cause us to change the genes. So now we're introducing the recessive gene for whatever that might be. We'll say color, this blue color, into this population that has only the dominant form of that gene and are all red. So we're having an exchange of genes, and that is gene flow. In my next video, I will talk about natural selection, which is the last driving force behind evolution. That is one of the most important that we are going to focus a lot on.